time is it? Where is everyone? Oh. Oh, the theater's open. What are you doing? Get out of my way. I'll just climb over you. You, get out of my face. Let's go. We gotta go to the Rat Theater. Watch out. Hey, I'm Will.
And I'm Chris.
And we're the Rat Boys. Today we're here to explore the highs
and the lows
of Rogue Trader. But first, let's talk about how we score our games.
Our scoring system looks at 11 different aspects that apply to every game and is scaled 1 through 10.
We take our personal scores and average them together to get our final scores.
Then we take our individual final scores and average those two together to get the final score.
This method allows us to be more objective in our results than the typical scoring method.
Just because you love a game doesn't mean that it's as good as you actually believe it to be.
Now with that out of the way, let's get into the review. Released on December 7th, 2023, Rogue Trader is a CRPG set in the Warhammer 40k universe. Other similar games include Baldur's Gate 3, the Wasteland series, and the Divinity Original Sin series. The game retails between $49.99 to $99.99, depending on the edition. The game was developed and published by Owlcat Games, who also made the Kingmaker Pathfinder game. Rogue Trader is available for Windows, Mac, PS5, and the Xbox Series X. The game features a 1 to 6 player main campaign mode with many options to customize your difficulty. Rogue Trader takes around 50 to 120 hours to beat, depending on how much you explore and how fast or slow a reader you are. And yes, there's a lot of reading. In Rogue Trader, you assume the role as a Lord Captain, who serves the Imperium Man as an explorer, an interstellar merchant, and a commander of worlds. Gather your crew and head into the Coronis Expanse in your trusty void ship. Explore worlds, manage colonies, and make decisions that are way above your pay grade as a person. Do you actually do these things as advertised? For the most part, yes. You're essentially an untouchable, power-hungry force to be reckoned with. Throughout the game, you travel through many different worlds, meeting various challenges and generally taking every matter into your own hands. Narratively, your decisions do matter. However, the results of these decisions are pretty lackluster, more times than not. Character creation and leveling system gives a very diverse way to build your party. There are many ways to build your characters, so experimenting is encouraged. Some builds are definitely better than others, but even if you feel like you've messed up, there's a way to respec. When it comes to combat, you're looking at a typical turn-based battle system. There's some things that it offers that other games lack, but overall nothing too special. That's not to say that it's bad. Everything works for the most part. There's some jankiness, but those aspects are generally just an inconvenience. In addition to the ground combat, there's also space battles. The majority of these space battles are optional and can be very frustrating in the early game. It's good to take note that you can generally avoid these battles until you get some additional parts for your ship. The ship battles are different from your normal combat in a few ways. You're generally outnumbered, you can't heal during fights, and you only control one ship. And you are forced to move during your turn. This game has more text than your average book. The voice acting seems to be randomly placed throughout the game. So if you want to know what's happening in the story, you need to prepare yourself for some very, very long reading sessions. Some entire scenarios are done in a storytelling manner, where instead of actually acting out the scenario, you instead skill check your way through the text-based story. When it comes to colony management, you can have up to 5 colonies under your control. You mine resources from derelict planets, upgrade your colonies, which in turn can provide you with resources, items, and even perks for your party, or void ship. Occasionally you have to go to your colonies to deal with issues they run into. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, colonies serve you as another way to upgrade your party. Instead of your usual currency, Rogue Trader uses a profit factor, which is essentially a representation of your commercial power. Instead, you have to donate unused equipment and materials to various factions to level up their reputation and gain access to more of their equipment. It's badly explained in-game, but essentially equipment is money, and profit factor is just a representation of your wealth.
I genuinely love the character leveling in this game, along with the amount of options you have at the beginning of the game to build your specific character the way you want. You want to be powered by the traumas you get in battle? Go for it. You want to be the face of the party and have your character abilities scale with your fellowship? Go for it. You want to be the sword bro or gun bro? Go for it. To add on to that, colonies allow for you to customize your character and your ship just that bit much more, making them an excellent addition for boosting your character just that smidge more. Story worlds, along with some side worlds, have unique scenarios to them with their own set of options that could change something about your party or self permanently. Quite a few times there's interactions with the environment that can affect the upcoming battle, though it generally doesn't significantly change the environment or outcomes of the battle you are going to have. It's a nice addition either way.
Every companion is interesting to me. They all have their own objectives, they all say what's on their mind, they have different views and their own opinions that they continuously express during your adventures. And none of them felt one note to me. It really felt like you and your party were growing throughout the entire story. You can make extra fully customizable characters if you want, but then you'd be missing out on some input and opportunities that the main cast provides. For example, Idria, one of your early companions, can use her psyker powers to warn the party from ambushes, while Cassie, on the other hand, can read people's auras and give extra information in some interaction. Even though we played on the daring difficulty, I really appreciate that the custom difficulty options are so extensive. If you don't like the ship battles, you can just adjust the difficulty for just the ship battles. Think skill checks and dialogue are unfair? Change it. You think cover isn't doing enough? You can change that too. These options can really be moved around enough to create your own preferred experience. The ability to go anywhere you want at almost any point after Act 1 and not feel underleveled was really nice. It felt like no matter where you went, things were balanced enough to get you through, even whenever the enemies started ramping up their HP and damage. This game is very lore heavy. Almost every item in conversation talks about or describes something that is exclusive to the Warhammer 40k universe. With that being said, most of these unique terms are able to be selected for the in-game explanation to what it is and can be viewed right in the conversation box. So even if you're not familiar with the 40k universe, you can still learn the terms that they use. It does seem, however, that later in the game they do slack off on this feature. Regardless, they made some effort on getting the new arrivals up to speed. Between the character building, the ship upgrades, and feeling like every encounter can be dealt with if you just think hard enough through your moves, was really commendable. There's only a couple of times that I felt like the scenario I was in was just completely unwinnable. Even then, it only took a few party adjustments to figure it out. I personally enjoyed the story throughout the entire game. I was starting to worry whenever I was seeing posts saying that the story would fall apart halfway through the game. But for me, everything stayed cohesive throughout the entire story. You can make an argument that the last act got a little shaky, but it felt more like the devs wanted to have a late game twist, and not really destroying the narrative in the process.
For some reason, I believe it to be elevation and maybe line of sight, your abilities don't always work as intended. There's a few abilities that are cone attacks that just get cut off almost completely if your enemy is just 5 foot of elevation above you, even if you should have clear line of sight. Then there's AoEs that just don't proc if enemies are on stairs. The character pathing is awful as well. Many times I was navigating mines or dangerous terrain and the character sent out to disarm or navigate the terrain would just walk into the thing I'm trying to get them to disarm. Later in the game you can get a larger ally, and boy, pathing them around these features is even worse. Better they get stuck out of combat because of them not fitting through specific areas. Ship battles. Oh, ship battles. Maybe it was just a me problem, but ship battles were genuinely not fun for the most part. Getting a full payload to the bow before getting a turn, despite picking an option in dialogue that made it seem like you would get first turn, happened all too often. That and my being all over the place with my conviction most likely stopped me from getting a decent ship built until very late in the game. And as much as I like colonies, the fact you can miss one based on dialogue choice / roleplay decisions really upset me because colonies are the biggest decider on making your ship better. The loading screens, bro. Jesus, the loading screens. There's a very early location in the Coronis Expanse called Footfall. It's a place that's required to visit several times throughout the story, not counting getting to this place. Getting out of it takes 3 loading screens to get back on your ship, then another 2 to get to the galaxy, and then the Coronis Expanse, which is the overworld. And these loading screens could take a full minute for the computer I'm on to load into the next area. I might as well go take a shower, make a sandwich, go for a nap, and maybe I'll be able to click on the button to go to the next screen. Yes, you have to tell the game you're ready before it loads you into the next screen.
Autosaves in this game are absolutely trash. They seem almost random. You can spend 20 minutes on a planet and go through many encounters and many loading screens with absolutely no autosaves. In space, they save at the beginning of every battle, but not during land battles. There are many times you'll go through large blocks of story, with no autosave safety net to be had. You can, however, do quick saves, but the inconsistency of autosaves is still really irritating. The cutscenes are almost all broken. The camera is almost always out of place during pretty important scenes, so bad to the point where I thought the game had crashed. Turns out the entire scene was taking place out of my sight. There's other times where everything feels out of sync. Every scene that involves shooting has a lag to the shots affecting the targets. I could certainly understand someone losing their immersion from these scenes. To me, it looks like a bad play when those scenes play out. This is a complaint that I have in a many number of games. In a game that completely bases itself off of numbers and probabilities, such information should be clearly available to see. For instance, there are multiple classes that hinge off their ability to score critical hits. But there's no way to just see your resting crit chance, and if there is a way, I couldn't find it. This also goes for AoE skill saves during battle. Single target abilities show their probabilities of success, but AoE skills do not. Building characters around these features is hard to know how effective they truly are. When it comes to the voice acting, the actors themselves are good, but every conversation seems to have random lines voiced and others not. You'll be in one conversation, and in one section you're listening, and then suddenly you're right back to reading in that very same conversation. In a game like this, where there's so much reading, it's almost exciting to know that you don't have to, only to find out that it was just for that one dialogue option is disappointing.
There's points in the game where your colonies call upon you to address situations happening on the ground. The thing that irked me about this is the fact that you can ask your retinue for their opinion. This option will sometimes replace already existing options that seem better than what they gave you in replacement. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because these upgrades you get aren't always amazing. But it would be nice if your other options didn't disappear because you asked your allies what they think.
This game offers controller support, but it's vastly inferior to mouse and keyboard. Doing anything with the controller just takes longer. Navigating any menu is a chore in comparison.
I felt that convictions could have been worked on a bit more, allowing for the player to gain more conviction. The way it gets explained in menu makes it feel like you will have enough options throughout the game to be well-rounded, and then make choices to settle yourself into a specific conviction like dogmatic. But that wasn't the case. I don't think it is necessarily a bad choice, but it didn't feel like a good choice either. It would be nice, maybe overpowered I guess, to be able to get to rank 2 on each conviction and then push yourself up to rank 5 in whatever you want to be rank 5 in. But I assume that's not where Alcal wanted the game to go.
There's a big oversight with Pascal. 2 of the 3 second-tier classes offer abilities that do free attacks. When selected, he can only use his melee weapon. This is a huge error. That makes those abilities just bad to have for him. One of those classes also has this issue with its ultimate ability, making it completely useless for him. There are a couple of these issues throughout the game, but this made him very annoying to use and required respec to fix.
Hovering over solar systems in the overworld map should probably allow you to see what rumors might be listed there, along with missions outside of the main missions.
Between writing this review and the release date of the game, there have been 12 patches with over 350 plus fixes to the game. This tells me that the devs actually care and is listening to the community, and some of our complaints might actually be fixed down the line.
Companion quest finales were pretty underwhelming generally. Of course, I only got to finish about 4 of them, however even within those 4, only 2 of them paid out. The payouts weren't that amazing. It was good armor for the 2 characters that got through and all, but I was hoping for an ultimate weapon for those characters. However, I guess that's my experience in older RPGs clouding my judgment on what this game should do.
This game offers a season pass with 2 scheduled DLCs. My hopes are that the DLCs will be almost mini campaigns that offer extensions to the main story. Anything less would be a waste. The other hope is allowing a mod kit to make custom campaigns, similar to what a couple of the Shadowrun games do. I say this as a possibility because whenever you select a new game, it seems like the campaign selection can have a drop-down menu. If that were to be the case, that would bring this game to a whole other level.
Somewhere towards the midpoint of the game, Alcat decided to make ability checks become extremely difficult. I understand why, but I don't think they should have been -100s and above. They should have been something between 60 to maybe 80. I'm not sure how much daring difficulty changed the skill checks and dialogue at that point though, so this is more of a minor complaint than that point.
For me, whenever it comes to visuals, I look at the graphics, camera controls, cutscenes, and animations. Does this game capture the look of the 40K universe? Yes, but it should. That's its main job. Where it loses me is the camera controls overall. The terrible cutscene animations, the text boxes in cutscenes not being voiced, so there's this awkward wait time in between characters speaking that you can't skip through. And even some character animations during battle are just kind of awkward. Shots not hitting a model but then doing damage to the model, and weird lags in between selecting an action and that action playing out on screen. It hurts me to say, but I give the visuals of this game a 4 out of 10 rats. If all those issues were fixed, I'd give this game a 6 or 7, but as it stands currently, it gets a 4.
Genuinely have nothing to add to visuals. I didn't care one way or the other. It was just blocks on the screen for me, and considering how low I had to put the graphics in order to play the game. That being said, I did think the game looked good from what I could see on Will's screen. Maybe if I had a system that could play it at the highest graphical fidelity, I would put more stock into these things, but I personally feel that most games should go backwards on graphics to make way for the gameplay and mechanics because that's where most of the fun is at. Graphics are just a plus. So I'll just leave this as a 6 rats for my final score.
The sound of this game do what they're supposed to do. Bolters sound like bolters, chainswords sound like chainswords. The music scores are good, nothing really stands out to me one way or the other. I will say that there aren't any annoying music scores in the game, so for me, that's 6 rats.
As far as audio goes, what can I really say? Musical choices weren't bad, but they were more of a background noise because it felt like it played the same music all the time after a while. As far as it goes for the guns and other weapons, they sounded as I would expect. So honestly, it ended up just being a 5 rats.
The overarching story is solid to me. The cast is good, things are well written, there's some twists, reveals, and overall a pleasant experience. Reading may be a chore, but even to me, a person who dislikes reading, I still read most of the things on the screen. If a game can make me read, it's already doing something right. Online I've seen complaints, but for me, I just disagree with what's being said. Its highs are much more memorable than its lows. 7 rats.
The game's story started off pretty strong for me. It was actually a really good introduction to the Warhammer universe, and also to being a rogue trader. Especially considering the amount of lore dump they give you through hovering over text and when in conversation. The amount of information that you get is a bit of an overload. However, it was fine ultimately in my opinion. I originally rated the story a 9 for the beginning, but after the honeymoon phase and many chapters, the score fluctuated quite often. My final average was 7.6 rats.
The pacing in this game whenever it comes to story is pretty middling to me. I don't like to read. This game feels like an entire series of books put into one. The game itself is broken down into 5 acts. The first 3 are solid, but in Act 4 you have to backtrack everywhere you've already been. Some places are different, but not enough to make it feel like it was worth it. There were some interesting instances in the later acts, but it felt like Act 4 was just Act 2.5, and was placed there more of an interlude rather than an entire new experience. The pacing for me in this game is just an average 5 rats. If Act 4 or 5 had a bit more to it, I could see myself giving it a 6. Maybe if they put out a solid DLC, it would help.
Honestly. Chapter 1 was an amazing introduction, and the pacing was great. Chapter 2 was basically huge lore dump, freedom of movement. Chapter 3 brought the pacing back to manageable in my opinion, but Chapter 4 made the game kind of railroady in dialogue even though you could arguably not follow their pacing. But it breaks the pacing for me. Chapter 5 overall, pacing was fine, despite me getting stuck for about an hour trying to find a story trigger to open the last area. I'd say that overall the pacing was so varied for me, but ultimately ended as 6.6 rats out of 10. This score is based on my average score throughout each chapter.
Character development to me means, does your main character and cast grow mentally and mechanically? For this game, I'd say yes, absolutely. You get forced into a position of power, and throughout the story, you get more accustomed to your role as a rogue trader. You're constantly being metaphorically and sometimes literally haunted by your predecessor's decisions, trying to become your own person and not just filling the shoes of the previous rogue trader. This aspect plays really well for me personally. The relationships you make with the people outside of your party also has growth throughout the game. The politics and betrayals in the Expanse directly influence the story and is just good. For this topic, I'm giving it an 8 rats.
I honestly enjoyed the character development quite a lot. There's a lot of options in the leveling. However, it did feel like there was too many options that just didn't matter to me at all ultimately towards the end of the game. But I had to choose something anyways because I leveled up and really should appease the leveling gods. Overall though, I think that the character development was a 7.4 rats out of 10.
In the aspect of world development, for me it's definitely not as prevalent as the character development. The Expanse doesn't really change that much, and the decisions you make don't really seem to change all that much for everyone else. As a rogue trader, your decisions are supposed to affect billions of people. It just doesn't feel like it does. Some instances matter, and narratively change the immediate surroundings, but nothing far-reaching like the game likes to lead you to believe. For this, it's just 6 out of 10 rats.
Overall, the world development was in and out for me. At the beginning of the game, it didn't exist really. Chapter 2 came around and you start to make a bit of world building. But by Chapter 4 and 5, it's basically negligible and doesn't really exist anymore. So I'd say that ultimately the score for this would be around a 5 rats out of 10. It starts off strong, but it just tapers off into non-existence.
The gameplay loop in this game is to be expected from other games in this genre. I personally didn't mind the ship battles myself. They were probably the most challenging instances in the game. The way shops were handled was interesting, though you really have to pick and choose which factions you support to get their good equipment. Conversations were fun and well written, despite how lengthy they could become. Every skill seemed to have a purpose to invest in, and the battles were just fun to do. I think the gameplay is a 7 rats. If more lines were voiced, and the ship battles were polished up a bit, it would help this game out.
I don't have much more to add that I haven't already added in the past with everything else that I've said at this point. Say that the gameplay was a solid 6 rat boys. Above average experience.
This game goes deep in the mechanics as far as character building, which is really good for a CRPG. Problem is, if you aren't used to this type of game, you're going to struggle. The sheer amount of options to read through is staggering. The learning curve for inexperienced players is pretty high. That being said, if you know how to build in these kinds of games, your party can be pretty broken early on. Towards the halfway point of the game, I didn't go past the second round of any combat before killing every enemy in the encounter. This includes the final boss fight. In my opinion, Cassia is just too powerful for her own good. I was giving her 3 to 4 turns per round, and she destroyed everyone. Like it wasn't even close. I had to stop using her because of how devastating she had become. Even then, every character can be broken in their own way. It's fun to be broken, but objectively speaking, it takes away from the tension of the battle that you feel in other games, like this. With all that said, the mechanics in this game are a solid 6 out of 10 rats for me. If the enemies were as crazy as the player characters, I could see this to be a 7. Reminder, I played this on daring difficulty, so maybe it's different in the higher difficulties.
There's a few things here and there that made this section go pretty low for me throughout the chapters. But the overall thing that irked me the most was the Grand Strategist not being able to rotate their ability. I love the idea of the class, and I really wanted it to work, but it didn't. Otherwise, most things were just normal, and sometimes amazing. Like, things you could do to make a single character a powerhouse on your team was pretty cool to me. So between the highs and lows, I'd give mechanics a 6 rats still.
CRPGs are one of my favorite genres of games, and this game does not disappoint me. During my 120-hour playthrough, every day felt like I was starting a new adventure. I was generally excited to get into what was in store for the day. The frustrating parts were getting burned out from all the reading, the autosaves being trash, and the back and forth traveling to areas I've already been to. On top of that, you have the hundreds of loading screens. With that said, 8 rats.
Was it fun? Yes, I'd say so. But what I engaged in that made me find the game fun may not be the same as what you find fun in games. Which for my rat brain was watching numbers grow larger because I did stuff with my build to make me have big number. I'd say it was a 7.6 out of 10 rats for this score.
The possibility of choices, character building, and narrative differences alone make this game very replayable. On top of that, the difficulty setting you can customize can really change your experience throughout your playthroughs. Where it lacks in is, unfortunately, no matter how many different choices you make, the endings will always boil down to the same few options. This, coupled with all the reading you'll have to do to notice any of the narrative changes, makes the overall narrative lackluster in my opinion. That being said, this game is all about the journey and not the destination. 8 out of 10 rats.
As far as it goes for the game's replayability, I'd say that it definitely has that option. But I wouldn't say it's a completely worthwhile experience for someone that doesn't have that kind of time to put in to see what the different options give you. I personally would do it again, but I really need something better to play on if I'm to do that again. I'd say that it's a good 9 out of 10 rats.
At the end of the game, I felt pretty good about my experience. The ending itself is okay. It's just a lot more reading. The journey of this game will stick with me for a while, but it wasn't anything life-changing. I enjoyed my time overall with the game, and the individual characters aren't going to stick with me for very long. I will compare other games in this genre to the same quality and standard that this game has. The depth of character building rivals any other game in the same genre. At the end of the game, I felt that my experience was an 8 out of 10 rats.
My overall feels about the game, it was good. 6.6 rats. If you want more details, the game just had a lot going for it, and it also had a lot of things not going for it. But Alcat has updated the game at least 3 times since we started playing the game, and maybe within the next 2 updates they will have fixed the things I consider the pits, like not being able to spin my grok shit strategist squares. Please just let me play my way. With that being said, my average score is conveniently a 6.6 rats out of 10. I generally enjoyed the game despite the low score. The exploration was fun, character building was great. The beginning of the story was also really interesting. It just kinda dived off towards the mid/end game. Even that wasn't all that bad though. I definitely suggest the game to anyone that loves the Warhammer 40k series, and is also a fan of CRPGs.
With all that said, my personal final score for Rogue Trader is an above average 6.6 rats out of 10. The game is solid, and if you like CRPGs, this is one to pick up if you have the time to commit to it. If you're new to the genre, or if you disdain reading, I would not fault you for passing on this game. Its learning curve can be considered pretty high for some people, but if you put in the effort, this game is definitely one to get through. And with our combined scores, Rogue Trader lands at a 6.6 rats out of 10. The game is above average overall. I could see that after a year or so of DLCs and updates, the game could have the potential to be a solid 7. Keep in mind that our scoring system makes it a bit more difficult for games to prove themselves again. A 5 is average, as opposed to the other reviewers that like to hand out 7s as the average. So when we say a game is above average, we mean it. Before we end this review, we're going to go over some mods that have the potential to push the game into a better direction. We did not use any of these mods ourselves, but have done some research to see if they work as intended. All of these mods are on Nexus Mods. First up is Toy Box by Cabarius. This mod offers over 500 cheats, tweaks, and quality of life improvements for the game. This tool can be used to fix just about every issue that you encounter. If the quest that you're doing doesn't give the loot that it's supposed to for whatever reason, cheat it in. If you feel like that you don't have enough convictions by the end of the game, you can just give yourself convictions. You don't want to try and spin your profit factor to respec? You can do it for free. With all that being said, that's assuming that you can install it correctly. This mod specifically has a lot of steps that a lot of people have issues with trying to get it to work. But if you can get it to work, then this could be a very valuable tool for your playthroughs. Second mod on the list is the Better Sorting Type mod by Archive Dev. This mod gives you more sorting options for your inventory, perfect for any pack rat. Third on our list is the Toggle tab by Showcase 10. This mod toggles the tab key, which highlights interactables in the environment. This allows you to not have to hold down the tab key all of the time. Though it may be small in features, you'll definitely have an easier time finding stuff. For those who don't like to read, we have the W40K speech mod by Oozed. This mod adds text-to-speech to all those pesky conversations. This mod has the potential to draw in a much larger crowd to the game and should definitely be noted. Finally, we have Rogue's Delight Immersion Graphics Reshade by Patrick 122112. This reshade mod looks great. The environment pops, the foggy static is gone, and just sets a better tone for the game overall.
Well, that's it for our review of Rogue Trader. If this helped you at all, feel free to drop us a like and sub. We're new on the scene and any support is welcomed. If you'd like to hang out, we're over on Twitch, link in the description. If you want us to cover any specific game, feel free to leave a comment. Games we review don't have to be new, but they do have to be out of early access. We have access to just about any console ever made, so don't worry about that. We got you. Until next time,
RatBoi's out. It's time to go. We're all out of peanut. Dude, what are you doing? Get out of my way. I'm trying to go to bed. Yeah, up there. Yeah. Hey, scoot over, bro. I'm trying to get in there.